Hi everyone. So I have a little bit of time with working from home and trying to keep myself distracted a little bit from everything that's happening. And so I have a couple of paintings that I've done in the past that haven't been finished. And recently I came across a new product called New Classic Resin. This product makes your paintings, your finishes super shiny and glossy and gives that sense of it being behind a glass. It's one of the best products that I've become familiar with. And today I wanted to show you a little bit about how I'm going to do this one painting. Now it is leveled. I put some pegs in the back so that it's lifted off the ground. And I have my resin that I'm going to be mixing into this container here. For this specific one, I'm actually going to be adding some sparkles to it so that it gives a little bit of that little shine to it. The tools I have is one of these plastic knives to be able to mix the resin really well. That's super important. And then also one of these spatulas to be able to even out the resin everywhere. So with that, the way to get started is I'm going to be pouring in the part A and part B onto this cup so that we can start mixing. And you do need to mix it for at least 3 minutes really well so that it gets incorporated. And it's important that you mix all the sides, but we're not wanting to mix it like you're beating eggs, because then you're gonna end up with a lot of bubbles, and the last thing you want on your piece are bubbles to have to deal with later. The resin is quite liquidy, as you can see, and that's the way it should be. If you're having trouble removing the resin out of the containers, it is recommended that you warm up your resin so that it is more fluid. So this is what I'm doing now, and it is equal parts resin and equal parts hardener. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to kind of mix this resin really well before I add my sparkles onto the resin. You do want to make sure that your canvas is clean as well, so that you don't have any imperfections, especially on canvases that have a white background. It's important for you to have it nice and clean. If you recently painted a painting, I would recommend waiting a couple of days before you do the resin, because this will avoid the off gases that paint and other products you may be using on your art from creating those bubbles. So I'm just gonna take a few moments here to really mix this well. As you can see, I'm not beating it, I'm just mixing it. You may not be able to see that, but it's not quite yet clear. It still has almost a foggy kind of feeling or viewership to it. So we just want to continue to mix it for a little while until it becomes clear. And again, making sure you scrape those sides, so, and the bottom as well. This is a small canvas, but for bigger canvases where you're working with a lot more resin, it is important that you really scrape the sides and the bottoms and really mix it well so that you don't run into problems after you've let it dry. So the new resin that we're working with is called New Classic for art, and it is a product you can find on the Instagram account New Classic, I believe. I'll share that information with you on a link on how to get a hold of this product. You can use this product for many other things, not just canvases like this, but you can use it for tabletops, you can use it for casting and so forth. So if you're looking for a resin that is super clear, super glossy, I definitely recommend you looking up this type of resin. I do believe they are also available on Amazon, and they are doing some shipping. So if you want to get a hold of this for yourself, you can also find them on Amazon. And again, I'll post the link to their page as soon as I'm done here. So my resin now is looking a bit more clear. So what I'm gonna do next is actually add some sparkle. So
My apologies. I couldn't
this
hear what you
sparkle
said.
here, that was my phone. This sparkle here is just a really nice shimmer. And I think you can see it there. It's got a little bit of a green, but I don't mind that because it does give a little sparkle to it. I've tried using some diamond dust on another piece of artwork and I didn't fall in love with it. So I'm thinking this is probably gonna be best for this piece here. So I'm just gonna add a little bit. So it depends how much you want or how little you want. I'm just gonna put a little bit because I don't want it to be overpowering where it's taking over the whole canvas, but I do want that little shimmer to it with the look of glass. It's really gonna give us a really nice sparkle to this painting here, which is pretty simple to begin with. So we're just gonna continue to mix this really well. Again, making sure that we're scraping the sides, making sure that we incorporate those sparkles we just added. And it should be pretty runny. As you can see, this is the consistency it should be, but we're just gonna continue to let it mix in a little bit more. Making sure we have all those sparkles. You may not see the sparkles right now in the camera, but as soon as we paste it, you'll definitely be able to see these sparkles. And I think just a dash of sparkles is enough. Again, you don't want to overpower it. You just want to have just enough to be able to pour it and have that visibility of that shimmer to it. So I think I've mixed it. You definitely don't want to overmix the resin either. If you overmix the resin, what happens is it starts to get hard and it starts to cure. So we definitely don't want to overmix it, but we do. It's so important. Again, and I know I've mentioned this already twice, but it is super important that the resin is well mixed together because it will not dry properly if it's not mixed well. Again, don't beat it and don't create more bubbles than necessary. Just a nice rounded motion to get everything incorporated. Okay, so I think this is pretty much well mixed for me. I'm happy with it. So I'm just going to start the process and show you what it looks like as we pour. All right, so again, this is what the painting kind of looks like before. As you can see, there's no shine to it. It is a pretty simple background with the feet and shoes. So I have it placed down. It is reasonably leveled. If it's not level, then you're gonna have your resin kind of pull into the middle or fall all off to the sides. It is common to have some resin kind of fall out of the canvas here because it is self-leveling, so you don't have to worry about that. And so just like that, I'm going to pour this resin everywhere. You start with down the middle, off to the sides. You can see it's super runny, easy to manage. And you can already start seeing some of the sparkle as we pour it. We don't want to pour it too high up. We want to keep it down close to the canvas so that it's not creating more bubbles than we need. And I'm just going to let this run off a little bit here on the cup so that we get a chance to use all the resin. We don't want to waste any. So I'm just going to leave this here for a little bit. And with this tool here that we have, it has a couple of different size teeth on it. And this just makes it easy to spread. So I'm going to start off with the smaller teeth so that I can really push this resin around as much as I can to make sure we put the resin everywhere. And so just really first coat here, the first kind of steps is just to really push the resin around, make sure we're getting it in every corner. and covering the whole piece with a nice layer of resin. Again, this New Age Classic resin is so easy to work with, and the finish is just outstanding. All right, so I'm just really pushing this resin around. And I am also doing a little bit of a time lapse, so you will, once I'm done this, I will post the time lapse as well, so that you can really see how I work with the resin and how I just kind of push it around with this spatula I have here. You can use another kind of tool if you'd like. There's no reason why you can't use a flat knife or just any kind of spatula. I find that this one here is just super easy to work with, to move the resin where you need it to be moved to, and make sure that it has a nice, even layer to it. This new classic resin just brings this piece to life. It brings these colors, the colors of your painting or your artwork, whatever you're going to be using this on, just brings the colors to life and vibrant. It makes it super vibrant. All right, so I'm just really trying to make sure, because I know that this painting, the canvas itself isn't a top grade canvas. So I know that it might pool a little bit in the middle. It's not a big deal. You don't really see that it's pooled in the middle. It just looks a little thicker, which is not a bad thing. But I do want to make sure that all the edges of my painting are covered, so we have a nice consistency. And once it dries, we don't have any issues with certain places of the canvas not having any resin. All right. So we got to remember that this resin is fluid, and it will continue to move around. So it is important that we keep a little eye close to it for a little while, so that if there are any spaces that don't have any resin, we can go back and cover it. You will start to notice that it will start to harden a little bit. And that's, of course, that's just a curing time. That's quite normal for that to happen. It is self-leveling, so you'll really start to see it become super clear. I just want to make sure I have it in all the edges. This is just the right amount of resin for this painting, so I don't have much flowing over the sides. And so I want to really focus on making sure these sides or the edges of this canvas has enough resin so that we're not disappointed when we're done. All right. So if your painting hasn't been drying for a long time like mine has, obviously it's been a couple of years since I've touched this canvas, so there shouldn't be any off gases. But if yours does have, or is a newer painting and you're resining your painting, you will need some sort of heat source to burst any bubbles that might come up. It's a natural process of the resin. If there are bubbles, they will rise to the surface, and the only way to kind of get rid of those bubbles is to use a heat source. So some of the things that we have used in the past have been a torch. So a torch is really easy to get rid of all of these bubbles that may occur, or a heat gun. And if you don't have either one of those two things, you can always use a hair dryer. Now keep in mind, with a hair dryer, it will move the resin around. It may create some dust particles. So you want to make sure that you're really looking at your piece and making sure that you're taking out any necessary dust that's accumulated on your resin, and that you also keep a lookout for the sides of your painting and any drips that may occur. I don't see too many drips here on mine. So I think it's looking pretty good for me. So I think I'm kind of done touching it. We don't want to obviously encourage you touching it a lot. I'm just going to move around to make sure that there aren't any places where I've missed some resin. And I do see a couple little bubbles that are creating there. So I will be taking out my heat gun and just kind of bursting those bubbles a little bit to make sure that we don't have any bubbles. So I think I'm pretty satisfied with the way it looks. It is super shiny already, and the sparkle just gives that little bit of a glam to it. So super, super happy. Just want to stretch this resin just over the canvas here so that it's completely stretched and covered. This looks awesome here. So I'm just going to actually get my heat gun because I do see a couple little bubbles. So I'm just going to connect my heat gun on and really just covering over this canvas. Always moving. You don't want to stay in one spot because you don't want the opportunity to burn your canvas. But this will bust any bubbles or burst any bubbles you may have. And really, depending of what you see, you do need to kind of get down to the level of the canvas to really see if you see any bubbles creating. I don't really see much more, but you can always come back in a little bit. And it should be a really nice, sleek finish. Now remember, if your painting is not completely flat, you will actually see it a little lifted, and that's okay. I mean, not everyone's paintings are a smooth finish, so it's really dependent of how you've painted your painting. It's dependent of how much paint you have. So if you have a painting that has a little bit more crevices in it and you have a lot more paint, you might want to add more resin to it so that you can make sure that that's all covered. It's a good opportunity now to look for any kind of dust particles that might have fallen. And I think I see something, so I'm just gonna get a toothpick. So with a little toothpick or something, you can pick out any imperfections. Now I'm not quite sure if this is the canvas here or so we have a little hair, it looks like, or a little dust particle that kind of attached itself here. And sometimes that happens when you're using a blow dryer or you're using a heat gun like this one here. But I think that was pretty much it. I don't see any other imperfections. So I'm just going to go over the heat gun where I touched it because it does move the resin a little bit. And do one last look around just to make sure I don't see any imperfections. This is going to turn out so amazing. I'm so happy how it looks already. You can see the sparkle, you can see the shine, even the reflection already on there. And again, I'm just looking for some imperfections. If I touch it, I will go back with the heat gun. What this does is actually just soften the resin so that it moves around and becomes fluid so that it levels itself out a little bit better. Okay, so this looks amazing. There are some spots around, the canvas where, now I should be using gloves. That's why I went to get a napkin. I got my fingers a little dirty here with this spatula. But the mixing tool that I used earlier, it's nothing special. It's really just a plastic knife. It's important that you come along the sides here and just capture any of those drips that might have come down. Now, of course, if you over resin or if you mixed way too much resin for your specific size of canvas, you're gonna have a lot more that's going to drip off the sides. I did just enough, actually. See a little dust particle here I want to get rid of. And I'm just going to go back, just soften that out a little bit. And just keep looking for any imperfections. Now I'm being super picky here because I really want this to come out nicely. Again, just off to the sides here, making sure that no drips are coming down. And also the bottom, making sure that nothing from the bottom is dripping, because this will be very difficult to, well, not difficult. If you do have drips at the bottoms that dry, you can always go back and sand them down. So it's not a big concern, but of course, the less work we have to do, the better it is. And so I like to make sure that I keep all the drips to a minimum here by just running the tool at the bottom of it and just evening out those drip marks on the sides if there are any. All right. So I recommend that you keep a lookout or come and see your piece every once in a while to make sure that there are no drips. So that really wasn't anything there, but it was actually the painting. So I think I'm done with this heat gun. You don't want to overheat the resin either. You just want it to heat it enough so that you can play around with it and smooth off the edges here. So I'm pretty much done with it. I don't want to overwork it. It looks great. I'll come back to it in about 10 minutes, take a look at it, clean any of the bottom edges that I may have dripped over the edges. And then it does need to cure for at least 24 hours before you can touch it. After 24 hours, another 24 hours before it's completely cured. And of course, the longer you allow it to dry, the better it is. So come back in about 10 minutes to make sure the edges are not dripping off, make sure no additional dust particles have attached itself to the resin, and then we'll have the finished product. Thanks everyone for watching, and if you have any questions, you can email me, you can message me. You can also find me on Instagram at Liz Ioli. Thanks so much everyone, talk to you soon.